I insist that what it is to be a woman, or indeed what it is to be a man or any other gender, is an open-ended question.
Refugee services.
Trump signed the order last month.
Do you believe in God?
The more I look at the universe, just the less convinced I am.
Of these wildfires sweeping through LA right now.
Can you be more precise about what's potentially dangerous? You know, write your college paper for you.
It's very difficult for anybody to even entertain the possibility that someone died and come back to life.
Welcome to Counterculture, Biblical Truth for a Confused World. I'm Will Bacher, Grace Youth Pastor, and I'm glad you're here. Today's world feels more divided than ever. Politics, identity, justice, and faith all collide, leaving many confused and searching for answers. But what if the Bible speaks more clearly to today's biggest issues than we think? In this series, we're tackling real topics like immigration, climate, sexuality, and technology through the lens of God's Word. No cliches, no noise, just truth, wisdom, and grace for a complicated world. This week's topic is advancing technology and personhood. God is personal. Mm-hmm. Let's dive in. Today I'm here with my co-hosts. Please introduce yourselves.
You can do that. I'm Andrew. I'm the site lead at Grace McCain.
And I'm Sarah. I'm one of the pastors here at Grace.
I'm Rob, and I'm also on staff here at Grace as the digital content lead.
Nice. So appropriate that you're here for the AI and technology week.
Actually. So
glad you're
definitely
joining us. So we're going to jump in with a little icebreaker question here today. So I asked you all to think about this to answer the question of what is your favorite kind of sci-fi, futuristic kind of movie, something in that realm. Derek referenced a couple in his sermon like Terminator and RoboCop, something kind of in that realm. If you have something to kind of share with the people, and then that'll kind of usher us into our discussion. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. I had two. One of my go-tos is Demolition Man, which is an old, I think it's from the 90s with like Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes. Mm-hmm. And it's as 90s as you can get. A lot of explosions, a lot of and it's great. I love it. Watch it anytime. But the other one I thought of that I think falls into this category is Interstellar. Which is also a phenomenal movie.
Great movie.
And I love a good 3-hour.
Wow.
I could. Oh man.
But it holds your attention the whole time.
The whole time. I was like, what's gonna happen?
That's a great movie.
What's gonna happen? So and I learned a lot about black holes, which probably was not scientifically accurate.
Yeah, maybe
that's
it's
okay.
not real.
But that's what you're
that's
basing.
What I'm holding. That's what I'm.
Yeah.
Fun to dream about.
Basing your belief on.
Yeah.
Great.
I'm pretty much an astronaut.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Who else?
You're up, Rob.
I'm up. I don't know if this is my favorite. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but it's a early 2000s movie called In Time, I think it's called, with Justin Timberlake, actually. He was one of the main characters. But I thought the concept was so cool. It's actually where time is considered currency. And so everybody on their arms has a clock on when they're going to die, basically. And I guess the wealthy, from what I can remember, the wealthy could actually accumulate time easily, so they were set. But if you weren't wealthy, you had to fight to gain time on your clock. And I don't know, it just gets you thinking, if you knew when you were going to die, how would you live differently? How would you fight for more time if that was an option? I don't know. I thought it was relevant to what we were kind of talking about in the sermon series too. So just love the concept.
That's cool.
How about you, Sarah?
So my answer might tip my hand toward whether or not I'm in the fearful rejection or utopian embrace categories, extremes of the AI conversation. No, I don't enjoy those kinds of movies.
That's okay. Yeah.
And so the closest I could get to of something, I'm what did I actually enjoy? I've seen a bunch of them, but I would never watch them again. And I was like, oh man, I loved the Jetsons.
There you go.
Yeah.
When I was a kid.
Stuff.
And I was like, man, if I could get Rosie to pick up my room for me, and if I could be like George on that moving sidewalk in the morning, and just the moving sidewalk and all the robots got him ready for the day. He didn't have to do it. I was like, I'm down for that.
Okay.
But that's about it.
I like that your life has been influenced by that.
That's good. That's positive.
I think that's
I'm going to go to the extreme other end of the spectrum with the robots taking over and doing crazy things. So I appreciate that. But so I have one honorable mention is Blade Runner 2049, which is the spiritual successor to the 80s Blade Runner. I think it's incredible, kind of living in a world where we can't determine the robots and the AI have become so hyper-realistic that we can't determine who's a human and who's a robot. And the Blade Runner's job is to kind of hunt down the robots that are going to overthrow the human race. So great movie. And then my actual number one answer for this is one called Ex Machina. So for both of these, parental discretion is advised, but Ex Machina is kind of about a genius, billionaire tech CEO. They may have been alluding to a specific person, but who owns this company, and he has a private resort on an island, and he flies one of his employees out to the island, and he's working on this hyper realistic human robot AI, and things go awry. So those are two of my favorites. Highly recommend them, with discretion advised. But yeah, that's kind of my wheelhouse. I love movies. Good. But we're gonna move into the sermon here to discuss that. And so you referenced these two extreme perspectives, Sarah. So we're going to talk about the fearful rejection and the utopian acceptance around this idea of AI and advancing technology. Which of those two do you guys see more of in the world today, and why are both of those ultimately wrong to fully embrace as a way of living? What do you guys think?
I have loads of thoughts.
Please. Yeah,
I don't know if you want to hear all of them.
Start us off.
But I have loads of thoughts. So I feel like there's this sense in humanity that we were created for something more, and we're always seeking after like the good life, the better life, right? There's like that sense in us. Christians, I think we err on the side of fearful rejection most of the time, or through most of history. I mean, you can see how we were fearful of all kinds of technological advancements throughout history. And I think it's because we know that the ultimate good life is found in God and God alone, right? And so we get fearful of anything that tells us outside of God that it's going to satisfy some sort. So I think I'm giving us the benefit of the doubt on like why we lean in toward fearful rejection a little bit more. Whereas without Christ, what but technology could take us to that next level of the good life? Like what could extend life and make it easier and help blah, 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 you know what I mean? And so there has to be a utopian embrace of something. Otherwise, you just have to give in to despair. So that's from maybe a more philosophical lens. Like that's why I think that we have those two extremes, and why I think that Christianity in general, myself included, tends to lean toward the fearful rejection. Though I resist rejection, I do. But I'm going to just say like that you guys will always have to bring me back from the brink.
Okay. Yeah.
No,
I think, which one do we see more of? I actually think there's pretty good amounts of both in the world. And I didn't know about, I'm not going to remember the name of this, but when Derek was talking about how a lot of the Silicon Valley folks have this acronym TESCREAL, of all these like kind of advancing technology, extending life. I don't know if you guys remember what all of them stood for, but I think that's kind of the utopian embrace of thinking that we're going to be able to cure all disease on our own and solve all the issues through what is seemingly like a religion around the kind of technology and personhood advancement pieces. So I think that's kind of the utopian embrace is kind of alive and well in our world too.
Yeah, and I think I don't know, I just hearing the question and kind of absorbing it for a minute, I go to, the Christian worldview. If I'm thinking secularly about this, I think it all comes back down to money and control. So I think there's probably a divide socioeconomically between people that will fully embrace sort of this, we can see a future where all this exists. And then there's another side that just says, I don't see that future, so I'm going to move towards, and I think fear sells. I just think we live in a culture where fear is a moneymaker for a lot of people. It has been for a long time. So I think those at the top, some of those elite, I'm thinking of like a news channel CEOs and things like that, where there is an element where my status, my income, and my position can affect which side of that I fall on, and then I can also control and affect which side other people fall on and make more money off of those people. So I don't know, it's kind of a nebulous answer to the question, but I think there's both represented. I think it can be divided into smaller camps and larger camps maybe based on status.
That's interesting. For me, in my perspective, it's been a lot more experience with the fearful rejection in my life. Like it seems like everybody's more leaning toward that, Christian or non-Christian. And I was kind of thinking through it too, like why is that, like kind of like you were, Sarah. And the media came to my mind. I think a lot of this stuff when it comes out, we all know the media likes to push fear because that's what we talk about, that's what goes viral. And so I think a lot of that is on the top of our minds when we're talking about this kind of stuff, and I think it does lead to a lot of the fear side of things, me included. But except for my brother Dan, he's the opposite. He's opposite of me actually. He's full in for this stuff, and he'll actually get a little bit offended sometimes if you try pushing back on some of these AI advancements and VR and everything.
Yeah.
So there's definitely people out there that
Yeah.
lean to the other side too in my life. But
Okay.
Yeah,
All
interesting.
right. Well, so we're going to jump into our kind of biblical model for personhood here. So you guys will have to stick with me. This is kind of a mouthful of a definition, but in the sermon, biblical personhood was defined as involving God imparting a soul, a divine spark, which elevated us above all creation. In Genesis, we see this two-step process. First, God forms the physical body, a masterpiece sculpted from the earth itself, and yet the framework is incomplete, and it's the second step, God's breath entering man's nostrils, that transforms inert matter into a living soul. The soul and consciousness are intertwined, inseparable facets bestowed upon us by our Creator. You can tell I didn't write that because I don't typically talk with that much eloquence. But based on that definition, any piece of that you want to kind of pull out of that definition, what's distinct about personhood that separates us from technology, and why is that a critical thing to understand? You guys have thoughts on that? I know that was a mouthful, so there's a lot there for sure.
for me, it just reminds me of when Derek was saying how he asked ChatGPT, what makes you not human, or what qualities do you have, don't have that humans have. And I thought it was so interesting how it actually knew those things. It said, it said love, I think it was one of them, empathy, true creativity. This is all going off memory.
Consciousness was one of them.
Yeah.
There was something about morality in there too.
There was, yeah.
And I don't know, I thought that was so true with all those things. Like AI itself even acknowledged that it can't love the way we love. It can't empathize the way we empathize right now. And I thought that was so fascinating that it told us that itself. But that's so true.
It's really good, Rob.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that imago Dei that he's given us, he as the ultimate creator has given us as, people and humans to then also go and create, not as he creates, but as like sub-creators under his sovereignty. And he actually commanded that, their first command was to multiply his goodness in the world. Take what he'd done in the garden and go and multiply and replicate that. And so, man, human beings are like uber creative. We can't hold all the things that we have made and thought about and come up with in one brain at one time. So I kind of feel like AI is like the holding place for all of it that I can then draw from.
Totally.
Like I can't hold everything in Will's brain and my brain simultaneously. But AI can help me access what was in Will's brain or what was in Einstein's brain or what was in, somebody else's and pull that out.
And Vinny, you guys ditched your encyclopedia sets since Sunday. Derek recommended we don't have to keep those dusty old books around anymore.
I can't remember ever having.
I love
my
the
mom
smell
probably had,
of a room full of books. I will never get rid of them.
There you go. Fair enough.
It's all about the smell.
Oh, that's good. We were actually just talking about at youth group recently how nothing else in all of creation other than humanity gets the dignity and worth that come from having God's image placed in them. That's the only thing that's specifically mentioned is God putting his likeness into the part of his creation, other than the creation just reflecting his creativity. But humanity has who God is built within them, and no technology will ever have the same worth as that. So I think for me that was the key piece of realizing we will always be distinct for maybe nothing else other than that, and that to me would be the most important distinction anyways. Even if that ends up being the only distinction, I think that would always be something that where we couldn't be the same.
Yeah,
no matter how advanced it gets.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of those things. I think they're all just components that paint a big picture of why we are actually separate from technology, this sacred nature that God, and I do love the idea that God breathed life into us. We did nothing on our own to sort of animate flesh, but he breathed his life into us, put his likeness in us and on us. And there's something that we as human beings can never reproduce that thing, right? So, yeah.
But don't we aspire to it?
Yeah, we want to do it. We want, and I think that's part of this whole push towards, and I think Again, I think Derek referenced kind of the Tower of Babel and these, this. I think that's what we're looking for, right? Is this society, this utopian society that we as man can create that is supposed to mirror or image something that God has already created for us, and gives us access to through His Son's death and resurrection, the shed blood of Jesus. So I think it's again we'd love to have that. Goes back to in the garden, the fall, right? Sort of this. It's always been this pursuit, I think, of being our own gods.
Well, and I think we talked about movies to begin with, and I kind of thought that was just a fun little place to start. But I actually think the media that we put out into the world kind of portrays what we really think and the things that we're fearful and anxious about, and it says more than we think it does often. And the fact that a lot of these movies where we're striving to create utopias or we're striving to create this amazing technology that's as sophisticated as humanity, it always goes poorly. It always goes off the rails. Yeah. And I think in human psychology, what's being portrayed there is we don't think that it's actually possible. Even if we try, even if we give it everything we have, every ounce of creativity and technology and whatever else, we're never going to be able to get there. Yeah. And maybe that means we don't actually want it to, ultimately. I don't know. I just think, we don't really want that. We're striving for it, but I don't think we really think that's possible.
But I think it's because we subconsciously know we're broken.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to betray somebody. Somebody's going to go after the power. Somebody's going to miswrite that one line of code. It's going to whatever. Somebody's going to forget to put a kill switch on the robot.
This is all a great script for another movie.
I like it. Write that down. That's good.
Listen, I have watched
Sarah,
some
you
of
are
them.
brainstorming.
I have learned but you know what I mean? So it's at that level, we who are so broken and flawed cannot possibly produce utopia out of our own selves, our own brains, our own goods. But we long for it. So there's a longing for the good life, and how do we get there?
Isn't it so fascinating that Derek used examples of people actually in relationships with AI robots or AI chatbots, and they're actually seeking that love and that empathy and that connection that it doesn't actually have. But that just shows how much we're craving and seeking those things. It's a deep desire of ours that if we can't find it, we'll go anywhere for those things.
And I think
that's a good point.
Try to
chocolate
find
chip cookies or an AI chatbot.
Right? But I think your point, Rob, I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's about us trying to find the easiest way to get those things without actually dealing with
the hard.
The emotions and the struggle and the tension that we as human beings just experience because we're flawed human beings. We want something that's sort of this, I want all the good stuff without having to deal with any of the bad stuff, and really stretch and grow my mind, stretch and grow my faith, stretch and grow my emotional intelligence, all that stuff. We want this easy replacement.
That's a great point.
Which again really removes a human element that helps us, I think, become better human beings, more like Jesus, right? Better disciples.
And I think all the research that's been done, there's a great book called The Anxious Generation that's been put out, and there's an article I read recently on a modern phenomenon in Japan where people essentially will fully retreat into their apartments or homes and not come out for years at a time, and they'll get everything delivered to home, and all of their engagement, all their connection is all through social media, technology, AI, these things that are being created. And I think that we're starting to see that it's a cheap imitation. I think it's not meeting the level of desire that we all have for genuine, real, true human connection. That I think that we're starting to see that there's nothing that can replace that. It is harder. People do want to take the easy way, but I think it's ending in more dissatisfaction than it's seeking to solve. So we're going to move now into kind of talking about the core part of the message, which is, I think Derek had a great turn of phrase there. We talked about the God breathing our life into us, and now there are these 6 soul-sustaining breaths that we can be breathing to kind of maintain ourselves in this AI world. And so those 6 things are breathing awareness by preparing for dramatic global changes, breathing gratitude by celebrating innovation and human ingenuity, breathing discernment by recognizing the pull towards idolatry and sin, breathing truth by resisting secular ideologies, breathing connection by prioritizing real relationships, and breathing limitations by leaning into your humanity. So for you, which one of those would you say personally you're in need of in your own life, that one of those breaths, and which do you see as key for our church, or just kind of the church in this moment that our culture is in? Thoughts on that? So there was a lot there. Each one of those had a lot underneath it, but which one of those kind of grabs, reaches out to you personally?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the discernment part never crossed my mind until that sermon, crazy enough. Like, I'd never thought through the concept that these things could become idols for us, and then also, sinful. He specifically mentioned, Derek mentioned pride in his sermon, and I was like, wow, I'd never even thought about how all this information at our fingertips in an instant can actually boost our egos and our pride. We feel like we can have the answers to everything and know the answers to everything because we can. At least that's how it resonated with me, and it just really got me thinking, like, man, I really need to be discerning and careful of that I don't start stepping into that pride or any other sin. So that's just something I want to be more mindful of, and I think maybe the whole church should be more mindful of too.
Yeah, that's really good, Rob. Yeah.
The other side of the pride thing was the sloth factor.
Oh, right.
And so I think, like, if there were just a couple basic questions anytime you're engaging, well, let's just use ChatGPT as an example of just like, am I doing this in order to make myself look awesome? Or am I doing this to shortcut and not have to do something hard?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, like, just consider, like, am I just engaging in pride or sloth here? How do I discern what the best use? Interestingly enough, guys, you're going to be so proud of me. So I forgot my notebook for today where I take all my notes on the sermons and whatever. And so I entered the sermon into ChatGPT and asked it for key points and some quotes from the sermon.
This is a big moment for Sarah. If we don't, can we acknowledge this?
Is that pride or sloth? Like,
no, this is for me personally, because I'm down with Rob on the discernment thing. I think that's like the call for all of us, whether you lean toward the fearful rejection or you lean toward the utopian embrace. I think discernment is wise for all of us. So my thing is, for personally, like the awareness, gratitude side of stuff, of like being aware this is happening. I cannot get away from it, right? Like, I could go check out and do the unplugged cabin on a mountain somewhere. That is my dream, but not yet. And also, like, gratitude for the ways in which it can serve and help and, come alongside the work that we're doing. And so this is just like a little toe into the waters for me of like, oh, look, it gave me a helpful summary to help my brain prepare. It's not my personal notes. I wish it was, but it did help me. But yeah, like, I need to discern and be aware and express gratitude for these tools, and how can they be used as tools in my life and in my work.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, I think the last one resonates with me. Breathe limitations by leaning into your humanity. And I go back to when Paul asks to have the thorn in his flesh removed. Yeah, and the answer is ultimately no. But it says, my grace is sufficient for you. And in this moment of like recognizing our limitations, and it says, my strength is made perfect in weakness. This idea that embracing my limitations as a human being and really understanding what they are ultimately draw me closer to the Lord and help me rely on Him more. And I think it's very easy in those pride and sloth sort of pulls to realize that those things actually they do nothing for my soul. They do nothing for my discipleship. They do not draw me closer to the Lord. In fact, they're sin patterns that pull me away. So embracing my limitations and saying, yeah, it's okay that I'm a limited human being, because in my limitations and really embracing limitations, it draws me closer into a relationship with my Heavenly Father. So I think that's really important. I do think connection's super important in a world that is really struggling right now with loneliness, and just thinking that we can prevent or in some way escape from loneliness by engaging with a screen or a bot or whatever that is. So I think connection's really important. I also think truth. I mean, just breathe truth by resisting those secular ideologies is really important for our church right now, and I think that kind of wraps a lot of this up in one point. But yeah. They're all great. I mean, they're all great points.
I was going to say, do you want to do the next three too?
Yeah, I was going to say, I just go right up to I started at the bottom. I could have started at the top and gone down. I was like,
I will say, I think the one that I really connected with, and it felt like I was in the room, and I felt like the response to the one about connection by prioritizing real relationships, people like applauded. I think people are hungry for that. Like, I remember Derek saying something to the effect of like, we need to reprioritize like just sitting around a table together and sharing a meal together, and the simplicity and the beauty of that. And with working in student ministry, you know, we'll try to put like all our phones in a little container, you know, so it's like no one's distracted during small group. Or you can do that if you're out to dinner with your life group or something with your friends, like put all your phones in the middle of the table. First one to touch their phone's paying for dinner, you know, kind of thing. Like challenge yourself like that to truly be present. Have time, you know, where you shut that thing off. Or I have a buddy who puts limits on his phone of like it'll just shut down and it can only do like literally the basic functions. Like he can't get on the internet or social media. Like because those kinds of things we think like, oh well, I'll prioritize real relationships, or I'll be present, but it's so easy to just drift towards engaging in it too much. And I do think it's good. I think there's lots of beauty and usefulness in it, but I think we're just drifted or we're inclined towards the kind of just going on autopilot. And so I think a lot of us could benefit from putting those kind of intentional practices in place to be present with the people who matter in our lives.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think that connection one is so important. You know, I think of Derek in his sermon again when he brought up how Mark Zuckerberg in a few years or whatever it was says that most people are going to have more AI friends on Facebook than real friends. That blew my mind. But at the same time, you know, it's like that's such a big need right now in our society. You know, I was looking at, I've heard of studies before that show that people feel like they don't have any good friends. The younger generations feel like they don't have any good friends these days. And again, it's like, where are they going, and how are they finding these friends and making these connections? And especially like you mentioned earlier with like the simplicity and convenience, the convenient way. But yeah, it's got me thinking. You know, I heard a study too that people, I'm totally blanking out on what that was. Oh, people, I have no idea.
That's right.
We're gonna have to keep moving on. It's gonna come back to me.
It will come back. But
say it if you remember.
What you're saying makes me think about like, what if the church modeled a different way? What if we modeled consistently we're out to eat and all the phones are piled in the middle of the table, or we just modeled consistently like you know, representing a different way, but that will take intentionality on our part. You know, absolutely. To do that, the people would be drawn to like, wait a second, those people look like they're actually having fun together. I want
that reminded me too. So when we were working on Grace Online previously. We learned that most people have online friends in the younger generations than actual face-to-face connections. And I think that ties in with it too. Like there's just so much going on in this world is my point of people like wanting those deep connections. So I think it's a great point.
I heard you say a lot of that, Rob, just now, and I feel like we're being issued a challenge essentially by Mark Zuckerberg. So if Mark Zuckerberg, if you're listening,
I think he's a frequent listener.
I would just say like not on our watch, right? As the church, like I am not going to let my daughter, I'm not going to let our youth group kids like exist in that space where they're only friends. I don't want that to be their only option. And I think that's a challenge to all of us to be that intentional friend role that we're trying to live out in our dream disciple roles.
I was just going to say the word intentionality. I think you said it first, and I think all 6 of these require intentionality. Like it's not, because I think it's easy, like we can shut our minds off, especially in a day and age where it's more accessible now to shut my mind off and have something else on, have AI kind of do my work, and AI maybe replace a relationship, and all of this stuff. It takes effort and intentionality to come back to these 6 breaths, and really live them out.
You know what AI could do? AI could be, Will's in charge of dinner tonight. He's in charge of the conversation. And Will's like, hey, give me 6 conversation starters for sci-fi geeks.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then he shows up at dinner, we pile our phones in the middle of the table, and Will's got 6 great questions. Now, if it had just been Will's brain, he might have come up with 3 average questions.
I mean, I feel attacked about the sci-fi label, but I'll take it.
But I'm just trying to like blend the two. Like, we don't have to completely reject it, but where can where could it enhance,
So we've done that around the dinner table, and we haven't done it with AI yet, but that would actually be really cool. But Addie will pull up questions on her phone, and then we'll just go around and all the kids will take turns in answering those questions.
Yeah.
So it is, and I think you do a lot with that to enhance the connection that you're making, or provide a fun activity or something like that. But to have that replace the connection.
Right.
No, I think so. That transitions us really well into we have a question that got submitted. So this will be a kind of our Q&A portion of someone who I think is doing their best to kind of have a balance of the discernment piece of, I want to be cautious with this, but I want to use it well. So I want to be grateful for the tools that we have available to us. So we got a question submitted. Someone shared that they use these generative AI technologies to help them understand Bible passages. Good purpose behind that. So I generally prompt for an explanation of a passage's theological themes and how the theme is developed throughout the entirety of Scripture. And they find the responses to be revealing, helpful, and consistent with the teaching that they've had in their life. And so they view generative AI as a helpful tool towards developing a more personal and systemic theology. And they say, as a layperson interested in deepening my understanding of the Bible through generative AI prompts and responses, what advice would you provide towards responsibly using the technology for those goals? So any thoughts on that? This will kind of close out this portion of our time on the podcast. So thoughts on that?
So I think just a big one for me is just that never be the only tool that you use.
Okay.
Like that never be the only thing that you rely on to deepen your understanding and deepen your, because I agree. I think it is a wonderful tool to use for things like that. The limits, it's a great tool. Just don't make that the only thing that you use. Derek referenced that in the sermon too. I mean, he said like sometimes he'll put information in and ask for sources, and it'll be like, well, basically I just made that up. So I'm like, so rely on it for some of that stuff, but make sure you have a system that you can check and balance. Make sure you're in. Also, I was like, this is where I'm like, don't forget about connections.
Yeah.
In your discipleship journey, always have somebody who's discipling you. Like always find that person. If you want to deepen your understanding of the Bible, find someone in your life that you trust that knows more about the Bible than you do, and rely on that connection as well. Rely on AI to maybe generate some really good questions and thoughts, but take that to somebody else and take it to Scripture. Take it to the actual Word of God, and make sure you're understanding what it says. There's so many tools out there that can help you do that. AI is one of them, but I think there's just, don't make that the only one that you're using.
No,
multiple tools in the toolbox. Yeah, I mean, even if you just like Google something, for example, theologically, the Church of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church, they've got a lot of stuff out there, and oftentimes it's high in the search engine optimization, and you ask it a question biblically and their stuff comes up. And if you're not aware that that's what it is, you're pulling from a theology that we would consider, like heresy. So definitely sourcing, asking AI to provide source material is good. One of the things, like for me in my growth personally, and I don't prescribe this for everyone, but I felt strongly that I just wanted to read the Bible as much as I could to know the Bible. And then I would talk to people who were more learned than me and those kinds of things to understand. And it was like several years of just me and the Bible and asking questions and talking to others before I actually like started to then engage with other people's writings about the Bible.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like then I went and I was like, okay, what is so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so? What are three other different like things to start to, because there's an ancient practice called Lectio Divina, of just like slowly reading and meditating on and asking a couple questions and slowly reading. Like that cannot be traded in.
Agreed.
And I'm an insatiable learner. I want to know all the things. I'm uber curious.
Yep.
But yeah, I agree with what you said, Andrew. Like make the Bible first and then have several tools in the toolbox, including other real life 3D people.
Well,
that you can talk to.
Something I've been thinking about, just a metaphor that'll help me, is that it's, we want to understand the tool that we're working with. If AI is a tool, let's think of it like a hammer or I was thinking about a drill, Number one, they're dangerous in a sense. Like it can poke you, that can make you bleed. So you want to understand what you're working with and know that it's not necessarily neutral. Like it can have an effect on you. And then the other piece of that is like, how do you want to use the tool? Because with a drill, you could say like, okay, how big of a hole do you want in the wall? That's going to depend on the bit that you put on the drill. And this all connects, I promise. I had a parent ask me recently, their son's gotten really into asking AI biblical questions. I'm like, that's awesome. So I think we should encourage the curiosity there, encourage the hunger for scriptural knowledge there. But they were asking, like, is there a way to kind of put some parameters on the things that AI can spit out, because like you said, Sarah, it could pull knowledge really from anywhere, and can we set kind of some safeguards on what it spits out as an answer? And so I have a friend that we're going to interview in a little bit here, actually, who kind of walked me through. You can say, yeah, we want it to be consistent with Grace's statement of theology, and could it reference Strong's Bible Concordance, which is a good Bible study resource that you learn about. So can you set those things in it to really help you get the most genuine and true information out of it possible? I think that would be one way that you could engage in that intentionally and do that well.
What I think too, I go back to, you did a fantastic training a couple weeks ago that helped me really think about how to read the Bible in a different way than I'd ever thought about, and looking at the historical context, the cultural and historical context, the literary context, the theological context, and even that is just like, for me, that would be helpful prompts. So I'm using AI, even language, to put around, well, what am I actually looking for in these passages, and what's the information that I can pull historically or from a literary pattern to actually help me do this
I want this
better.
From Orthodox creedal Christianity. I want to, having some vocabulary is helpful.
Asking sort of next level questions, not just what is this, what do you think this means? Because that could get you in a whole can of worms.
Right, and I think that one of the general metrics would be like, just don't let AI do all your thinking for you. Still be engaging in it critically, be asking questions, like ask yourself if it lines up with what you feel like Scripture says is true, which is why the continual scriptural reading, we should never lose that. You know what I mean? Like, that has to be foundational. So
in one of my recent classes, one of the things I had to read, a woman was talking about technology and its place in the world and the church and all the kinds of things. Anyway, she used a phrase that was like, for every extension there's an amputation. And so throughout history, for example, the extension is the new technological advancement or whatever. Cars, vehicles, awesome, right? Who would go back and undo having a car, But you need, like, what's often not thought of is the amputation. The amputation over not a very long period of time was horses were no longer the center of, and I'm talking about the United States, so we're no longer the center of our transportation world, And so is that an okay amputation? Whatever. So the point was just like, just think, we're not the ones necessarily, or at least I'm not, maybe you guys are far smarter and doing things I didn't know you were doing in your side hustle, but we're not creating these AI things personally, but we are using them. So how is this an extension of my personal life, and how is it amputating something in my personal life? Is it amputating my brain in some way? Is it amputating my time? Is it amputating my relationships? It just gives another frame of how to discern.
Yep,
that's great.
So guys, any last kind of closing thoughts here before we move towards our interview that we're about to have? Anything you guys kind of want to leave the conversation by saying?
Just one quick thought on that too, just from personal experience, is I use AI to help support my job in some ways, and I just learned it's still not right a lot of the time. So I would just caution against using it for work or even Bible study. Don't ever just put in something and just take for whatever it says as truth, even if it's a small thing. We know if in Scripture, if one thing is slightly not truth, that everything's not truth. It could lead us down a bad trail. So I would just caution against going strictly just to AI to answer the person's question.
Yeah.
So edit is what.
Always review, always check. Like you guys said, go to other sources. Just never take it as AI is right now. I don't think it's safe to just take whatever it says as gospel truth. So
one thing we'll maybe mention in the interview is Alex, my friend who we're going to talk to, told me that if you ask it something, like a question about something that is false, like if you'll ask it, if the earth is flat, or can you give me an argument for why we don't really breathe oxygen, it will give you an answer to that question as if that question is true. And it'll just spit that out. And so That's a really important piece of it to remember, that it's not like objective. It's doing what you tell it to, and if you tell it to do something incorrect, it's going to give you an incorrect answer. So I think you're exactly right about that. But
I got a few conspiracy theories I need to get off the ground. So
hey,
let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Well, hey, I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for being here and joining us on our final episode of the Counterculture podcast.
Gone too soon, guys.
So we're going to do an interview now with my friend and congregation member at Grace, Alex Moldovan, and we're going to talk some more about AI. Thanks. All right, so now we're going to interview a member of our Grace congregation who's deeply interested in AI and uses it in lots of creative ways. So let's jump into that interview with Alex Moldovan. So Alex, welcome to the Counterculture podcast. Can you explain a little bit about your background and your interest in AI? Like, how'd you first discover this topic? How'd you find an interest in that? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I do think when a lot of people think about AI, they think of the large language models, so like the ChatGPTs, the Geminis, things like that. I first became interested in that when Siri came out.
Okay.
So that virtual assistant kind of thing, right. I thought that was just so cool. And Siri was very limited, but when they presented it, I thought it was what a large language model is today. You can ask anything, you can do anything, and things like that. And I used it when I first got an iPhone. I think I got it a couple years after Siri came out. I would wrap a headphone up through my jacket when I skied, and I would use it to like text people or like stop or start like different songs and things like that. And I thought it was so much fun. So, but that was kind of like my first introduction. And then today I've probably used like ChatGPT came out in like 2022, 2023. Copilot was introduced. That's where I got introduced into it. And now today, like I've used it probably over 1,000 hours with work, and I've taught small businesses how to use large language models to basically boost their productivity or market. I've even done small churches, like small churches who have small staffs. How do they act like or provide resources that larger churches do? And I've done that too. So it's a fun process. It's a creative. Technical, creative at the same time, and that's what makes it fun for me. So
sure, well, so that kind of leads us right into our next question. So can you tell us kind of because you have a pretty broad knowledge of this, I would say more so than the average person. Can you kind of give us some of the best and most creative ways that you found that AI can be used, and any related to faith in particular that you've seen used well?
Yeah. So something fun about me is I'm a big foodie. Like I love like doing things with food, cooking with food, eating with food. I think it's a great way to interact with people. So two different things that I've done is one. So you can, with ChatGPT specifically, you can take pictures of your pantry and your fridge and your cupboard with all your spices and things like that, and you can say, what can I make with just these foods? Like I don't want to go out to the store. I just want to use these foods. What can I make? And it'll spit out like a ton of different options or things like that. Good ideas. Another food one was, so my wife and I, we just had a baby. Caleb is 5 weeks old yesterday. And before we did that, we ended up asking AI, we wanted to meal prep, like do freezer meals and things like that. So we decided to choose a whole bunch of freezer meals. It gave us a bunch of ingredients. So I basically fed all of that into AI. I had AI create one big shopping list for me. And then AI was able to basically put it into Instacart.
Okay.
And then someone else, it like just did that, let someone else do the shopping. It combined things too, because this used 1 onion, this used 3 onions, and it just made sure I had enough for everything. Okay. Then after that, we got all of the food. We went and picked up someone else's shopping. We picked it up. We came back home. We wrote down on 16 bags, recipe 1, recipe 2, recipe 3. And then it would tell me, I want you to cut all those 8 onions up. Put 1 cup of onions in bag 1, put 2 cups of onions in bag 3, and so you could just do one item and then move on to the next, and one item, move on to the next, instead of, because sometimes as soon as you get done with one, you go to the next bag and realize, I gotta bust out the onions. I was crying so much before, but now I don't need to, because you could just get it all done with
with that. So
that's a good word to any tired parents out there like us who maybe don't have the bandwidth to they want to think through, oh gosh, what am I going to make for dinner? You could use it to plan meals, meal prep, that just to kind of simplify that whole process. But before we move into our next question, any faith specific related ones?
Absolutely. And I think I listened to what you guys had said before, and I think you're absolutely right on understanding the context of the Bible. So we are. I like to say something. So it's like, if I told you it's as easy as getting blue socks in a little bowl, you would say that's really, really simple. But the context is, you know what blue socks are and you know what a bowl is. Yeah. But if I said it's as easy as getting the Red Sox in the Super Bowl, your context as an American living today, you would know that's impossible.
That makes sense.
Because the Red Sox aren't even in football. But sometimes we don't understand the context of biblical times because we are not living in that time, and there's just something that we miss. So I do think AI can be really good at helping you understand the background, helping you understand the culture, so you can apply that.
That's cool.
But some of the AIs I've done have done that. But recently, and you guys have talked about this as well, understanding it is good, but it doesn't always leave room for the Holy Spirit sometimes.
Yeah.
So
that's huge.
So if you, even the Pharisees knew so much about God, so much about the Bible, but they missed the point when Jesus was around. So I did recently make an AI that it would give me a little bit of cultural background, but instead of telling me like what the verse means, it would ask me a question.
Ooh,
and it would maybe like it would take teachings from big theological scholars and things like that, but it would ask in the form of an open-ended question to make me reflect on that.
Yeah, that way you're engaging with it, you're thinking, you're actually having to process through some stuff.
Yeah,
that's awesome. I love that.
And it sticks so much better too when you do that. So
very cool. Yeah. Okay, all right. So here's our next question. This is going to be kind of one of the heavy hitter ones. So as Christians and people of faith, just for our grace community, for the church in our nation and our world today, what moral concerns or anxiety around this topic do you think are legitimate, and where do you think we need to be cautious in that realm? Yeah. Do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I honestly, I think a lot of those things are very, very real. And we should be, in one sense, we should be fearful of what it can do. So most large language models are trained on all of the data on the internet. And when we say all of that data is good.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm not an expert,
but yeah.
Yeah. So I would say most of the data on the internet, I would say, is more secular, is more... I would say even now today, it's probably more false. You can go online and I mean, even on social media, one person says one thing and one person says something else, and you can't decipher which one is true, maybe just by reading that specific conversation, but you can go elsewhere. But AI is trained on that conversation, and someone's argument of a false thing becomes AI's argument for something that is combative to be true.
Yeah. Wow.
So left unguided, I would say ChatGPT would follow secular internet, and in general as well. You guys actually talked earlier about hallucinations, and I don't know if they said what hallucinations are, and it's basically just when AI spits out something that's absolutely false.
Yeah.
So OpenAI, who makes ChatGPT, less than a month ago, they announced a new model that's going to be coming out soon. Part of it is already out, actually, but they talked about their 4.0 model, which is their big model that almost everyone who uses ChatGPT uses, the 4 Omni model right now.
Yeah.
And they admitted that model shows hallucinations about 38% of the time.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's pretty high.
Yeah. So if I said a third of the things that I tell you is just false, that's a lot of things.
About that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it can be directed, and it can be narrowed down into things, but most AIs, as Rob had said, nowadays, if left unguided, will just allow for those hallucinations, allow for those false statements.
Well, I think that's when Derek was talking about those 6 breaths, and the one of breathing discernment. Like I think we need to not uncritically just accept whatever comes as just pure good, pure progress. I think we do need to still analyze the ways that it's falling short, and I think you're bringing some really key pieces of awareness to that.
Yeah, and also what Derek said of the things that you could fall into, the pride and the sloth. Like absolutely, I agree that those two things are huge because so if we were analogy, if we're doing trivia and I'm at a table of someone who knows all the answers to all of the questions.
Yeah.
When we win trivia, I think I'm super smart because we won trivia and I was on the team that won trivia.
You're part of that, yeah.
But that doesn't mean that I'm the smart one. And I would almost say the same thing of like in pride, like I've got something that sits in my pocket that could tell me anything I want to know, but it doesn't make me smart. I would honestly say today, and it could be controversial saying it, we were probably a less thoughtful and a less thoughtful generation, I would absolutely say.
Less like contemplative. I think some people in this generation of the world today are less kind of capable of doing like the research and the actual kind of learning themselves. There's shortcuts that have been taken, and you may have heard about there's concerns now of people who've kind of gotten all the way through medical school using ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you've heard about that.
Yeah.
But people are saying like start eating healthier because your doctors are getting through ChatGPT. So I think there's something to that, and I think it's not. I hear what you're saying. We don't want to necessarily lump everyone into that category, but I think we do need to bring an awareness to that. I think you're right in saying that.
Yeah. And I would admit myself, I am lazier now that I've used as much AI as I do. Yeah. Like
me too.
Yeah. My days aren't as hard, and so like I've kind of gotten into this slothful state, and like my brain's a muscle, and if I don't work out my brain, it's gonna get weak.
Totally. Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. So. Yeah. Anything to add on that question before we kind of move into talking about the big idea? Any last thing you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I would say the final thing is it is good to be cautious, but I do think it can be used as a useful tool. Traditionally through history, like a lot of Christians have been scared of technology. But what was the big technology of Jesus's day? Well, specifically more closer to Paul's day, biblical times, that was used so heavily that many people were afraid of was the Roman roads.
Yeah.
Like those roads, they were used by Rome to be occupied, and there were so many thieves on the roads, and so a lot of people were afraid to use the roads, and they were afraid that this technology, the road systems, was awful. That some people thought, but Paul had used the roads to do his ministries. Right. He had used the roads to send letters, and if you use new technology in the right way, you can absolutely do the Lord's work.
Yeah, it's a good word.
But it can be used in the wrong ways a lot of times too, so you have to be careful.
Well, I think the tool exists either way, right? You're saying like the Roman roads, those weren't going anywhere. So Paul might as well have used those for a good purpose. I think that's a good word. So Derek's big idea for the sermon, we're going to kind of end on this thought, is that personhood flows from the breath of a personal God. And those next steps for us were that to kind of breathe these three statements, do a inhale and then exhale by saying these three things, which is I am known by name, I am loved by choice, and I am created for connection. So which one of those three do you need to remember in the context of this kind of AI conversation that we're having?
Yeah. I feel like the connection is the big one. That one that sticks out to me a lot. Like I kind of said earlier, like AI can tell you a lot about God, but it can't connect you with God.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. It's the Pharisees are the ones who killed Jesus, as I said before. They knew so much about him. But you can still use AI to help. Don't use AI to substitute relationships, but you can use AI to formulate better relationships. And I think someone had said
Sarah, I think, shared something like use it to come up with good discussion questions for your next kind of life group time or next family dinner. You can utilize that to actually deepen those relationships, but not to replace them. I think is what you're saying. I think that's really good.
Yeah. So the one GPT that I call it the Holy Spirit activator that asks you the open-ended questions to make you think. I think that's a better way to prompt AI too. Of instead of saying like if we're going to do a Bible study, like and instead of saying all right, we're going to do this topic. Give me a quick brief on the culture and tell me what all the verses mean. I think that's not the way to go about it. I think it's better to say, give open-ended questions to allow good conversation so that we can grow in our faith. And I think that can be so much better. And yeah, I love the thought of bringing people together, and funny questions are a great way to bond people. And
totally. Well, I think just so, people who don't know you, like I give a little context that you and I are good friends, we're in life group together, and you having a knowledge of this, I feel like you're actually one of the most intentionally community-minded people that I know. And so I just think these things don't necessarily have to lead to like isolation. And, I don't think that your best friends are your AI things that you've built. Like, I don't think that's where you are at all. And so I think you're a great example of how to utilize those tools well and intentionally, and actually to gather people together, to deepen relationship, and to help us all know the Lord better. So I think that you're doing really well with that stuff. So
Thank you.
I appreciate it, everything that you offer in that realm. So any last thoughts you kind of want to conclude on, end on? Anything you think it would be important for our congregation or the church to know?
Yeah. I think it's important to parameters is the big thing. If ChatGPT is left wide open, it's going to use all of its resources.
Yeah.
So focusing it down to as you had said before with the one student of you can guide it and say, I want it to follow these specific things. I want it to follow these parameters. I want you to think through this lens. And though it can't think, it will produce a language that is through the lens that you desire, and I think that is important.
That's great.
And I would say I plan to make a tool if you guys use it or not. That's completely fine. But I did, as Sarah had said, I actually did run every single sermon and these as well, and I guess I'll put this one as well.
Okay.
Through
cool.
It's called Notebook LM, and it basically allows you. It doesn't use external resources. It only uses what is input into it.
Yeah.
And so if people feel like they want a reflection of like certain things, they could use that. So it's a free resource if people want to use that.
Great.
Take it or leave it. But
cool. Yeah, I'll pitch it to the pastoral team and see where we get with that. But thanks for sharing all your knowledge on that. We really appreciate you joining us. And so I just, on a personal note, I want to thank everyone who's tuned in every single week as we've dived even deeper into these topics. And our prayer is that you'll continue to have these conversations. You'll continue to think critically and Christianly as you continue your faith walk, your journey, living out God's story everywhere and every day. And just head over to whoisgrace.com/counterculture if you want to look for our YouVersion page to find Bible reading plans, anything like that, more resources. You can head to that webpage. But thank you guys so much for being with us on the Counterculture podcast.